Welcome to Camp Constitution Radio with your host, Hal Shurtleff. This show is heard on WBCQ The Planet every Monday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is broadcast out of Monticello, Maine. And it's heard also on IPMNation.org, Saturdays at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's an online 24-hour news service. And you can also see our show on YouTube. We post them as soon as they become available to us. The show is brought to you by Camp Constitution, which, among other things, runs a week-long family summer camp. Well, I want to say that we had a very successful trip, speakers engagement, Camp Constitution Speakers Bureau, had Reverend Stevie Kraft and Dr. Punyamurtula Kishore up in Maine, four different engagements. And while there weren't necessarily big turnouts, there were some really interesting connections and contacts. And as you've heard Dr. Kishore on the show before, he's the addiction specialist, perhaps one of the tops in the country, if not the world. And Reverend Stevie Kraft, who was one of our instructors of Camp Constitution. And the topic was the drug card and the race card, a deadly hand. And we had people who want them back up to Maine. We have a few pastors are interested in having them speak at their churches. We had a sheriff, a county sheriff, that wants to talk to Dr. Kishore, and also a warden of a county prison that's interested in Dr. Kishore's methods of treating drug addiction without using opioids or addictive drugs. So we're pleased with that. Our next engagement won't be till December 5th, which is a Monday, at the Endicott Estate in Dedham, Massachusetts. It'll be a topic on the Article 5 Convention, why it's a very bad idea. But we have a very special guest, Joaquin Fernandez. How you doing, Joaquin?
I am doing well. How are you, Hal?
Well, good. Thanks for being on the show. And Joaquin was the co-director of the documentary Indoctrination, which came out, I think, a few years ago. And it deals with the problems of government schools. And you have another project that you're underway, and I have a small part in that. In fact, I'd like to tell you, we got some good footage up in Maine. I got some pictures, a lot of good pictures, and some video clips. And we actually had a fellow come out to videotape the program on Saturday, and he had some really nice equipment, and that's going to be available on his website soon. And we had another fellow come out from a cable station in Waldoboro, so we should have some really good quality footage for you in the not-too-distant future.
Excellent.
Well, tell us a little bit about the Indoctrination documentary, and then we'll get into your current project.
Sure. Well, as you mentioned, it was released a few years ago. It was 2011. We started working on it in 2009, and that is a film that I did with my friend Colin Gunn, who is originally from Scotland. He lives in Texas for many years now and has a family there. And so what we did was we bought a school bus on Craigslist, turned it into an RV, and Colin and his family, they homeschool, as does my family, traveled across the nation from Texas all the way to New England, and making many stops along the way, and sort of chronicling the history of compulsory education in America. We kind of wanted to take a look at the educational system that we have, and some of the flaws that we saw, looking at it from a historical perspective, looking at where did we get this beast that we call public education, and why why we have it, and why it is such a progressive tool for the left. And so we looked at that, the history. We have a pretty interesting timeline there. A lot of people who were familiar with the topic in general were surprised to find out some of the origins and sort of the roots of the system. We also looked at it from a biblical perspective. So we looked at God's word and asked, what does God have to say about it? And so for the first part of that, we interviewed historians and different authors, and then we interviewed theologians and pastors, and But we interviewed also because we wanted to make sort of an empirical case as well. We interviewed public school teachers, principals, different kinds of educators. So the film, which is available at indoctrinationmovie.com, is an award-winning film. A lot of people loved it, and they would, buy copies to send to their friends. And the homeschool movement kind of used it as a tract of sorts, and they would give it to their friends and family. And so we had, for us, a pretty good success. We didn't know what to expect when we released it, but very happy with what the Lord allowed us to do there.
Well, what's interesting is that a lot of folks don't really understand the history of government education going back to Horace Mann, of Franklin, Massachusetts, and his travels to Prussia, and coming back and saying there's the future of our country is the state model, and they look at him as some kind of benevolent figure that had the best interest of the children of America. But I think that's not the true story. And what's amazing to me is we were just maybe a generation and a half from the founders. And here we were basically putting our children, force them to go into a government institution.
Indeed, yeah. We looked into that, and we had the honor and the privilege of interviewing Samuel Blumenfeld. He was very generous. He's gone to be with the Lord maybe last year, I think. And
yes, June 1st of last year. That's correct.
Yeah. And so he was very gracious and gave us quite a bit of time, and we sat there in Harvard Square, and we went to Lexington Green, and he gave us the whole history of what you were just talking about, how really the Unitarians kind of co-opted the American education together with the Owenites, the descendants of Robert Owen, who was a Welsh industrialist and a utopian who tried in New Lanark, Scotland, very close by to where Colin Gunn grew up.
Oh, really?
And, yeah, so we traveled there and shot some footage there. He created this utopia, but it failed, and then it was sort of a socialist utopia where education was key. And then he moved to Indiana and started something there called New Harmony, Indiana. That's a town that still exists. So we went there and we showed the origins of that. But anyway, the Unitarians and the Owenites, they sort of got together and duped the Protestants, who were by and large homeschooling and using private schools or tutors. They sort of hoodwinked them by putting fear into them, saying with the large Catholic immigration, Irish, Italian, etc., saying, this was a sort of a popish conspiracy from the Vatican, and so we need all these, these kids needed to be educated in a Protestant faith, but, the Unitarians, they were by no means Trinitarian Protestants at all. And so they came up with this, and Horace Mann was the key figure in that. Of course, years later, we had John Dewey and the Humanists, one of the signers of the Humanist Manifesto, and these were avowed atheists and God haters. So,
in fact, Sam would refer to public schools as Unitarian prep schools.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
And so it's ironic that we have many Christian leaders speaking about taking back the public schools or the government schools, because they feel that the problems with the government school started in the 60s when the Supreme Court
prayer was taken out of school. That's right.
Removed the Bible and prayer from the schools, and so that's they think, that's where it all went wrong. But in the film, we chronicle and we demonstrate that's not the case at all.
And that's sort of I was talking to a gentleman who runs a Christian radio station up in northern Maine. He was one of the first in his area to homeschool his children. Of course, they're all grown up. They're in their 40s and 50s. But he said he got more flack from people in his own church on the subject. But thankfully, the attitude has changed about homeschooling to a very large extent. It's more accepted. And our good friend Dr. Kishore, as you know, he's a statistics man, and he went on to Falmouth, Massachusetts, which is on Cape Cod, and in whatever year it was, 2010, there were 4% or 2% homeschooling, and now it's 7%. And he was very pleased to see that. And that's a significant change in just a few years, from 2% to 7%. in a very liberal state. But it's interesting, in some states, a lot of liberals don't like the educational system either, you know, and they put their kids in either private schools or homeschools too. So and we homeschool. We have two that are still homeschooling. The others have gone beyond homeschooling, graduated and all. So I can't encourage it enough. And you know, a good percentage of our campers at Camp Constitution Summer Camp, I'd say more than half, are from a homeschool background, and we attend homeschool shows to reach out to people on issues in the Constitution, but also to sort of recruit for the camp, because these are the kinds of people we want. And I've always contended that the homeschool graduates are the wave of the future. They're the ones that are going to be the CEOs of the corporations and the politicians and so forth, and how important that is, because they haven't been indoctrinated. They can think for themselves. They can relate. And the sad thing is, as St. Blumenfeld called public schools, he said what they're doing in these schools, or government school, he said, is menticide, the death of a mind, the death of a brain. He may have coined that term. So where can I get that video if people are interested?
Yes, indoctrinationmovie.com is our website. You can either buy a DVD or you can click through there and download it or watch it. You know, you can rent it and watch it on Vimeo. So there's various ways to do it. We actually have Spanish version, and we have it dubbed into Russian also, because somebody was interested in doing that. So yeah, it's completely. I mean, the subtitle of the film is "Public Schools and the Decline of Christianity in America." But other nations, like 40-some, I think 47 nations. I mean, people from different nations, 47, I think, have purchased the film. So a lot of other countries, people in other countries have a lot of interest in it, because even if it's sort of chronicling the American system, a lot of it resonates with government schooling anywhere, really.
Well, what's interesting, our Sam Blumenfeld archive on the Camp Constitution's website, we get an analysis every month of who's hitting it, who's viewing it from country by country, and about 80% is the United States, but we get from all over the world. I said, this is phenomenal. And people in Saudi Arabia, for goodness sakes, are looking at, they probably will get in trouble if they're discovered. They're looking at a website like ours, you know. So it's very gratifying to see that impact. That's something that couldn't have been done without the advent of the Internet and social media. Something 30 or 40 years ago would be almost impossible to do. So now you are working on a project. It's an ongoing project, and it deals with our good friend Dr. Punyamurtula Kishore. Can you discuss that project? Absolutely.
So probably a year and change, maybe a couple of years ago, my friend Martin Selbrady, who is the vice president of the Chalcedon Foundation at chalcedon.edu, he really writes, and he's the editor of their magazine, Faith for All of Life. And he started writing. He's not really a journalist. But this is sort of his first foray into journalism. And he started writing about Dr. Kishore. He found out, I won't bore you with all the story, but how people can go to chalcedon.edu and read the first of 15 now articles that he's written over the last number of months, and how he got involved. And it was up there in Massachusetts, if I'm not mistaken. I think he met Dr. Kishore in Plymouth, where I went recently. Yeah, I think he heard there was an event there that Pastor Paul Jaley, I think, had.
That's correct, Paul Jaley of the Cedarville Baptist Church in Plymouth. That's right.
Correct. So anyway, I started reading these articles, and soon enough, like maybe the second or third article, I messaged Martin online and said, this would make a fascinating documentary. There's so many facets and so many sort of levels and subplots to this major plot. And so we sort of left it at that, kept reading about it, and then, every once in a while I would check in. And so at one point when Dr. Kishore was in prison, we communicated, and he told me, hey, he's going to be released in this date. Unfortunately, at that time, I was not able to go up, and I was thinking, well, wouldn't it be great to get some footage of him coming out and kind of get his first impressions upon release. But that didn't materialize. But more recently, earlier in June of this year, we flew him. I live in Wake Forest, North Carolina, outside of Raleigh. We flew Dr. Kishore down here. Martin flew in from Austin, Texas, where he lives. And Kerry Hume, he used to manage one of Kishore's offices, one of his clinics, drove up from South Carolina. And we spent a couple of days shooting the three of them, primarily Dr. Kishore, shooting their testimonies, their interviews. I asked Martin, tell me the story of how you got engaged and, what's the relevance from your perspective of this story, which he did very eloquently. And Kerry had sort of the perspective of the individuals that she built relationships with and helped, the recovering addicts and the different people and their families who interacted with her practice. And then the bulk of the time we spent with Dr. Kishore, and what I chose to do was to have him sort of looking straight at the camera, which is not typical for a documentary when you interview people. It's when we interviewed you, you're kind of looking at me, the interviewee, or the interviewer, right. And the camera's next to my face there, so, kind of offset. But with the Kishore, I had him look straight into the camera and just give his story almost as a deposition, because there's a legal aspect of this whole story, of course, as you know. So he just kind of gave us the whole story of how he first came to America, even before that, in his education and upbringing, and his sort of the medical history of his family, how they are scientists and physicians and into healthcare as professionals, and so when he arrived and his studies at Harvard, etc., and how he started his practice, and then how it grew, and his model, the so-called Massachusetts model, and then what happened, how powers that be and influencers and people who have a stake in the perpetuation of a certain model that uses methadone and Suboxone and other drugs to treat addiction perhaps were threatened by his practice as it grew in popularity and notoriety. And some of them sounds like they were sort of in cronism with the then Attorney General Martha Coakley. And so anyway, he told us the whole story and what happened, and so we got that on film. That was in June. And so a few weeks ago, we came up to Massachusetts with the film crew, and my company is Great Commission Films, and my friend Eric Woodard has a company called Marshall Multimedia here locally, and so his crew is partnering with us and came up there, and we conducted, I'm going to guess, about 17, 18 interviews up there over a period of a week. And so we went to Springfield and Holyoke in Massachusetts on the western side of the Commonwealth, and then, we shot some in Boston first, and then outside of Boston in Dedham, we rented a place and conducted a good number of interviews there, and then went to Plymouth and conducted a good number of interviews there, including some recovering addicts and former addicts who gave us their testimonies, which were very powerful, and some people that worked for Dr. Kishore, as well as providentially, the last, when you mentioned Paul Jaley, we interviewed him, and then he called the chief of police and also a senator there, a state senator.
That would be Vinny DiMacedo.
Vinny DiMacedo, indeed, yes. Yeah. And so he gave us an interview, and the chief of police gave us an interview, and so we got some really powerful footage. We got some what we call B-roll, which is just footage of the places some of the places that were where some of these events took place. We went to Dr. Kishore's house where he was arrested, and he told us about that. So we've collected a good amount of footage, but what we're trying to do is, we're looking at this story from several angles. One is sort of an alternative way of treating addiction, and particularly opioid or heroin addiction, that's very different than the sort of the conventional wisdom and the status quo that the now nationwide, really, because Botticelli, he used to be sort of the head of drug enforcement, I think, or I might be getting the title wrong, but he was in charge of in Massachusetts. He was a director.
That's right.
Yes. So now he is the national drug czar, quote unquote. Michael Botticelli. He was sort of the head of the Bureau of Substance Abuse in Massachusetts. So now we have this method, which is primarily taking people off of heroin and putting them on methadone or Suboxone, which are opioids, and they are addictive, and they people are dependent upon them. So, when you look up what methadone does, and when we interviewed people with that got on methadone to get off of heroin, and they tell us, I mean, these are recovering addicts, and they tell us in their own words on camera, getting off of methadone, the withdrawals are worse than heroin.
Really?
Totally. And look, all you have to do is, if your audience can go to Wikipedia, for example. I'm going to pull something up right now on my phone here. And let's see here. It says, methadone substitution as a treatment of opiate addiction has been widely criticized in the social sciences for its role in social control of addicts. It is suggested that methadone does not function as much to curb addiction as to redirect it and maintain dependency on authorized channels. So, and it continues, and basically saying, hey, and the addicts told us themselves. They said, hey, we went off one drug to get onto another drug. There's a place in Boston, which I'm sure you're aware of, called Methadone Mile. This is where Boston Globe wrote a lengthy article on this, and it's a disgrace, really. It's a place where there are methadone clinics where you go and you take your little cup of this blue substance, methadone, you take the whatever number of milligrams prescribed, and basically people are walking around like zombies. In fact, when we flew into Logan Airport, we're waiting for our van to come pick us up, and I'm just talking to someone who works there at the airport, this lady, and she's like, oh, what are you all doing here? So, we're here to film a documentary. Oh, really? On what? Well, on the heroin epidemic. Oh, wow. Hey, you all have to go to Methadone Mile. I go, I've never heard of the thing. And she goes, you need to go before you leave. You need to go to this place. I go, well, tell me about it. She says, it's also called Zombie Row.
That's right.
I've seen it. I walk by there, she says, to go to work every day, and I see these people just hanging. I mean, they're bent over, and they're just like zombies. I mean, they really look like you're going through like a zombie thing. And so I looked it up, and I it's easy. I found on Boston Globe, a very lengthy, again, article, Life and Loss on Methadone Mile. I mean, it's a disaster. So you have these people coming off of heroin, and then you just transfer the dependency to something that's authorized. It just kind of reminds me of Aldous Huxley's Soma. It's just, here, come get the drug, administered by the state, and, you'll be happy. But we know that is not what Dr. Kishore was trying to do. Dr. Kishore had a sobriety-based method. And his method was not get you into detox by finding a bed at the taxpayer's expense to get you into detox. It was home detox. Your family is the one who has to deal with you. The family knows, all your tricks and all your weaknesses and all your manipulations and all this. So he would do in-home detox. And he would not use opioids. He would not use addictive medicines. He would just treat the different symptoms that you had as you're withdrawing and all your issues with anxiety and all these things. But then once you were clean and doing urine samples, testing every day to see if, when the dope, the heroin was out of your system. And then eventually, soon enough, put you on Vivitrol. Vivitrol is a shot that they would administer every month, which removes the cravings. And you can read the testimonies, you can hear them on you will in the film of people saying, the cravings were gone, and I come back for it every month to stay, so those cravings not to come back and battle my addiction, my addictive tendencies, because we're addicted to all sorts of things in society. It could be addicted to TV or caffeine or anything, but so but they're not dependent on the drug that can have really adverse effects on you. Again, like Hal, if you go to, or your audience, they go to, again, Wikipedia. These are some of the adverse effects of methadone: sedation, diarrhea, constipation, flushing, perspiration, sweating, heat intolerance, dizziness, fainting, weakness, chronic fatigue, sleepiness, dry mouth, nausea, low blood pressure, hallucinations or confusion, headache, heart problems such as chest pain, abnormal heart rhythm, respiratory problems, weight gain, memory loss, stomach pains, itching, difficulty urinating, swelling, all kinds of mood changes, swings, being agitated, euphoria, disorientation, all kinds of things. This is not quality life. So Kishore's method was, let's get the person to be productive. Let's get the person to be of an important member of their family, their society, to be productive in the workforce, not create a dependent group of people. And again, not to tout the Wikipedia too much, but I'm just using that as the most basic search online. This is common sense. Anybody knows this, but it is the common and it's the sort of the conventional wisdom from the top down that this is the best method, and all the many studies are showing that this is but the street, the police officers, the people who are having to deal with this, they know this is not a quality of life that people are getting. And so we just want to kind of look into this story of one man and his practice, but we also want to look at the bigger picture using the Massachusetts problem as a sort of a microcosm of a bigger problem.
How soon? You only have 2 minutes left. How soon do you see when do you think the documentary will be available?
Well, our plan is to have it released in 2017. Martin is going to publish a book. All of his articles, he's going to sort of rewrite some of them and edit them, and so we're hoping to publish the book and release the film in 2017. We don't have a website even yet for it, but okay. And I haven't even put it up on greatcommissionfilms.com yet. But so we're still working. I don't even have a title yet. So the work in progress title is Hero in Disguise, or perhaps Heroine Disguise. It's spelled the same way. So
well, let me suggest one. He was awarded by the Boston Celtics Heroes Among Us. So maybe a Hero Among Us might be a good title.
Yes.
So again, by the way, I was contacted by a lady who does documentaries. She was involved in Blue and Farmageddon, and she called me. I was introducing Dr. Kishore at the podium, and I thought she had called me, and I said, just decline and call her back in a few minutes when I can. And I somehow didn't do that, and she heard me introducing him, and she says, "Oh my goodness, this is incredible!" Oh, and I mentioned the documentary that's in the. She says, "Well, when that's done, we want him in California. We'll have him, all around the state." So I said, "Okay, we'll be in touch." So,
well, thank you. Absolutely.
So again, can you give us your website?
Well, my website is greatcommissionfilms.com. And I can be reached at Joaquin, Joaquin, at greatcommissionfilms.com. And the Chalcedon Foundation, which is at chalcedon.edu, and Martin Salbrady is my contact there who's working with me on this. They are a 501c3. They are also helping, kind of spearhead some of the funding for this. And so they would be an ideal place if anyone cares about this and wants to contribute at this early stage. They can make a donation there, and they will appropriate it for the production of the film.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. God bless you. You've been listening to Camp Constitution Radio on WBCQ The Planet. Until next week, God bless, and may you have a wonderful Thanksgiving.